Howdy, Immortalium here. Welcome back to another discussion video. This time I will be answering a question from Samuel Trejo. Just before I actually start answering the question, I just want to say, Samuel, how many subs did I have when you subscribed to me? I'm just kind of curious because I've seen your name around for a very long time now. You're probably one of my older subscribers. So I'm just kind of curious, how many subs did I have, because then I'll be able to get an idea of how long you've been subbed to me. Anyway, to the actual question. So basically, Samuel has asked me what your thoughts are on the millions of manga that don't get released out of Japan. Millions seems a bit excessive to me, but I know what you mean. There is a lot of manga that don't get released outside of Japan. Well, most certainly a lot of manga that don't get released into English. I know there's a good bit that gets released into French and all that, but anyway, let's move on. So basically, there's a lot of manga that doesn't get translated, and there are several reasons for that. Let's start off with reason number one, and that is demographics. So basically, I think most of you are probably aware that there are like 4 major demographics in manga. There's shonen, which is 12 to 18-year-old boys, shoujo, which is 12 to 18-year-old girls, seinen, which is 18 plus males, and josei, which is 18 plus women. Sometimes a 5th demographic, children one, I can't recall the name for the children one, but sometimes that's included. But in general, it's those 4 that are like the key components of the manga industry. The most popular in both Japan and the West are shonen. And shonen manga, even if I just name off a couple of titles for you, you will know why they are the best selling. Because they're so popular. Attack on Titan, Naruto, One Piece, Bleach, Detective Conan, Fairy Tail, etc, etc. They are very, very popular, and they're generally, battle manga. Sometimes, there is a lot of shonen that, in fairness, aren't battle manga. Like, there's Azumanga, which is a comedy, Higurashi, which is a horror, Detective Conan, which is a mystery, etc, etc. But in general, they're fighting, and, they're very, very, very popular in both Japan and in the West, and that's why you see a lot of them get translated. Whereas the second most popular varies a bit, between Japan and the West. In Japan, I think seinen is a little bit more popular than shoujo, not by much, but a little. That's from what I've heard. I might be wrong on that. Whereas in the West, I can guarantee you this, 100%, shoujo is number 2. Shoujo's way, way, way more popular than seinen. And that's why, a lot of seinen titles aren't going to get translated, because they're just not that popular. Or at the very least, they're not as popular. Now, in fairness, there has been a push to try to get more kind of seinen titles out there in English. For example, a lot of Vertical's line are seinen titles. And Viz now have pretty much an entire, imprint devoted to seinen signature. But, okay, there is actually a little bit of, shonen Drifting Classroom, and josei, is Oku the Inner Chambers, in the signature, but in general it's seinen titles. But even with that, all that kind of pushing, not as popular in English as shonen and shoujo, so that's why you're not going to see as many of them get released. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is kind of cross-media marketing. So, as you guys probably know, a big, big part of getting manga popular, certain manga series popular over here in the West, is anime. So, if an anime is released of a manga, a lot more people are going to pay attention. But the thing to point out is, I kind of covered this in last week's one, which is the live-action manga, is that live-action titles are actually more popular than anime in Japan. I know, shocking for some people, but it's the truth. And when given the choice, quite often a mangaka is going to go for the live-action title over an anime title. Just because they're going to get more coverage and more people are going to see it and want to buy the manga, etc, etc. But very few live-action titles get released over here in English or in the West. The thing is, anime, for shonen titles, which quite often deal with fantastic elements, magic, crazy action sequences, etc, etc, quite often those are going to be done in anime, because if you were to make a live-action version of that, it would require a large budget in order to loyally adapt the source material. Whereas shoujo and seinen, which are admittedly quote-unquote more realistic, they can still have supernatural elements, but in general they're more kind of in the background, not as in your face, and basically in general they are more realistic, which makes it easier to bring into the big screen or the silver screen, whichever live action medium they choose to put it through. Which is why a lot of those mangaka who deal in those demographics are going to choose live action titles. And when that's done, Of course, they're gonna sell more copies in Japan, but they're losing like all that, you know, marketing over in the West, simply because the West, unfortunately, doesn't have that much interest in live-action titles, which is a shame. But that is a big reason, because, you know, if you go into manga halls, you know, on YouTube, don't do it now, like, do it after this video, but if you go into manga halls, you're going to see, like, a lot of the titles that are picked up are shonen, a good bit of shoujo, occasional seinen, probably almost no josei. Which is a shame. Then beyond that, there's only a couple of other reasons really. Like, one is age. So the older titles generally don't get much love in the West, which is a shame because I'm really interested in older manga titles. But the thing is, a lot of people just don't like, you know, old manga, which is a shame. There's a manga series that I've been wanting to read for a long time now called Tomorrow's Joe, also known as Ashita no Joe, which is this classic boxing manga. I think it's boxing. Yeah, it's a boxing manga from the 1970s. It's a shonen, but it's supposed to be an absolute fantastic manga, and I would love to read it, but because of its old age, probably not going to get released in English, at least not anytime soon. So that is a shame, because I would really love to read that title. There's probably a couple of other older titles as well, that, but in general, older manga doesn't get much love, so that is a big reason. And then the other reason is something that I haven't heard too much about. In fact, I've only heard from one source, and that was Vertical run an ask.fm. I actually do too, so if you ever want to ask me a question, you know, you can head to my ask.fm. But anyway, Vertical run ask.fm, and there was a question, like a similar-ish question to the one I'm answering now, asked to them. And apparently some mangaka in Japan don't want to release in English because of all the scanlations, which is pretty interesting. I've never heard of, you know, any mangaka actually saying that directly, which is very interesting. So there are apparently a lot of mangaka in Japan, well, not a lot, like a decent amount, that don't want their manga translated into English because of all the people reading scanlations. Pretty interesting. Like, I think that's a pretty interesting idea. Something that I would love to hear more about. I would love to hear, you know, from the mangaka themselves, and I would love to hear from the companies and all that, why, you know, that is a big deal. Of course, I'm completely opposed to scanlations, but, you know, I don't think enough people are aware of how much damage scanlations do to the manga industry. So I think that's pretty interesting. Beyond that, I'm not really sure what else there is. Like, those are kind of the big major reasons. The last thing I really want to touch on is, if you want to get a title released into English, you're gonna have to tell the companies that you want it in English. Basically, there's a couple of companies, like for example, Viz Media. Viz Media is owned partially by both Shogakukan and Shueisha. Now, Shueisha publish a lot of manga magazines in Japan, so do Shogakukan. Shueisha publishes like Shonen Jump, and a good bit of seinen titles, as well as some shoujo and all that. And Shogakukan, they do Weekly Shonen Sunday, along with, you know, lots of other seinen titles, etc, etc. And if you want to see something translated through those companies, like through those, like if your manga, the manga that you have an interest in getting translated, is published by either Shueisha or Shogakukan, you're gonna have to tell Viz Media, you know, whether it be on their Facebook, on their Twitter, etc, etc, whatever way you can contact them, that you're interested in seeing it get released. Now, there are exceptions to that. Like, for example, in the past week, we heard that I Am a Hero, or is it I Am the Hero? The zombie manga, anyway, is finally going to get an English release. This was something that a lot of people really wanted to get released for a long time now. Originally published by Shogakukan. So, you know, of course, I was always telling people, oh, you're going to have to talk to Viz Media about that if you want it published, because, you know, basically Shogakukan will want to release most of their titles through Viz Media. But it's actually being published by Dark Horse, which really surprised me, because Dark Horse hasn't dealt with Shogakukan for, I think, well over 20 years at this point. So, you know, that really surprised me. So, like, I guess that can work as well. But in general, if it's published by Shueisha or Shogakukan, contact Viz. When it comes to Kodansha titles, basically, in general, you're going to obviously want to contact Kodansha USA. but Vertical also are partially owned by Kodansha, so you can contact, well, contact them through Twitter and just simply tell them, oh, I'm interested in seeing, you know, this title from Kodansha get released. Also, like, they do a survey, although the survey is a bit limiting in certain aspects, like certain number of volumes, etc., etc. Anyway, you can do that in order to let companies know that you want to get a certain title released. And then other publishers, was it Akita Shoten and all those other ones, I think they're a bit more free in their, you know, what companies can publish which. So just let multiple companies know if you want a title released that has been released by Akita Shoten and all those other ones. So that's basically my biggest thing to you. Find out which companies are involved with which companies, and then contact them and let them know you're interested in a certain title getting translated. Because in the end, these companies do want money. And if they know that there's a demand for a certain title, like Dark Horse did for I Am a Hero, I Am the Hero, whatever it's called, then they will want to pursue it. Anyway, that's kind of my whole discussion on that. Hopefully it was, you know, answered Samuel's question. You can tell me, Samuel, if it did answer your question. And I want to know, of course, for next week, you know, what discussion topics, you know, to see. Also, I haven't done a manga review for a while. I hope to get a manga review out between now and the next discussion video, just for a bit of variety's sake. So you can look forward to that. But mainly just give me more topics to discuss for next week, because, you know, of course, the more topics I have, the easier it is for me. You know, I can just choose whatever I feel in the mood for and discuss it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.